final class of International Aiki Peace Week. We started on Monday up on campus with weapons. And then we trained Tuesday night and Wednesday morning and Friday afternoon as usual. And this is our Saturday class. And the end of the week, on the 21st of every September, the United Nations declares a Day of Peace, International Day of Peace, and Aiki Extensions, which is the international Aikido organization that extends Aikido principles beyond the dojo and off the mat, started an Aiki Peace Week, I forget how many years ago, but somewhere in the vicinity of 500 dojos worldwide participate in this. And each one agrees to make explicit the parts of Aikido that are related to peacemaking. There is a tendency in the Aikido world to suggest that it just happens. You get on the mat, you train, you become more peaceful. And while this is invariably true at some level, it's really important, I think, and in general, the group Aiki Extensions thinks that making it explicit and practicing it on purpose is really important. So what I did was take an informal poll of friends who were in Aikido, and I went to people who were not black belts and well-known and that sort of thing, went to kind of the rank and file, so to speak, and said, what is it about Aikido that in and of itself lends itself to peacemaking? And that's the first category I have here. I put a question mark by peace to indicate what we're asking ourselves is, how does peace relate to Aikido? It's called The Art of Peace. It was titled that in a book by John Stevenson. And then talking about the week as a whole, so that we have a practice of several things we do over and over again over time. Aikido as a whole has a sort of a Zen feel to it, was the first response I got. Not that it is Zen, but that it shares with Zen the characteristics of having regular practice, of dealing with balance, both metaphorical and literal, so your physical balance and your inner balance. That we deal with breath in a very specific way. We pay attention to how we're doing it. We change that, we adjust it, we take instruction about it so that we breathe in a way that helps our movement, helps our balance. And that we have a beginner's or receptive mind or spirit. A beginner's mind, so that we constantly return to looking into how we do what we do, as though we were just starting, so that we can pay attention to the structure of our choices. Second, it was suggested that doing a physical or somatic body-related blending practice allows us to blend in a way that is similar to trying to make peace with someone. So if I'm constantly opposing you, it's a different process than my trying to find some combination of what you want and what I want, a blend of our needs. And an actual physical practice of this leads us to understanding how it works in a non-physical way, extending to other things. And that our physical and somatic blending practice goes through 3 steps that are also appropriate to the peacemaking world. We work with ourselves. Am I blended with myself, meaning am I contiguous? Does my body stay together as a system? Can it operate as one thing, even though it has different parts? And then we do that with other people. Can I move in such a way that I move with you rather than against you when I choose to do so? And then with the world in general. Physically, the world is represented by the floor, and by organizing our space as martial artists. Aikido, one of its benefits is that there's a constant imagination of multiple attackers. And so we organize space and people around us in a very specific and purposeful way. And organizing, whether you're a community organizer or a peacemaking professional, is very important. So metaphorically, we do physical things that reinforce our metaphorical, our ideographic understanding of what peacemaking is. Aikido also has an ethics, specific ethics. Historically, it's based in the Moto Kyo, the religion that the founder was fascinated by. But the Aiki ethics is that we do, the founder made very clear that we're practicing what we do in the dojo not to get really good at defeating people, but so that we can make a contribution to the world. That we make the world a better place by changing how conflict works rather than defeating that particular person or being the biggest, fastest, strongest myself. The fact of practicing Aikido has in itself an ethical expectation, which is not necessarily true of other martial arts, which are much more pragmatic about, I win, you lose, defeating the opposition kind of thing. And finally, I think I chose an excessively academic way to talk about this, but I wrote pragmatic poetics because it's the metaphors that we deal with that keep us engaged with the pragmatism of our self-defense. So the self-defense works because we're applying this ethical we're applying this ethical understanding.
Thank
See
you.
ya. Have a lovely day.
You too. Thank you.
By poetics, what I mean is the metaphors we're talking about. Like if you read from the Art of Peace, the Doka, the poetry that the founder was famous for, and his students wrote much of it down. He would use metaphors like the floating bridge of heaven, which is a Japanese mythological structure, But it also, what do you do with that? By having to think about what do I do with that, the floating bridge of heaven becomes, I take my ideas, the up there intangible stuff, and I combine it in a very specific way with what's actually happening here on the ground. Therefore, that axis of idea to practical application and being the thing that goes out into the world in time. So it's the same, like, I won't get all mythological on you, that's my area of expertise, but there's lots of symbols that are that joining of the vertical and the horizontal axis. Right? Crosses are all about that, way predating the Christian era, that kind of thing. So he's using metaphors specifically, poetry, wise sayings, stuff like that, that are functional but not literal. We deal with images and themes that then allow us to cross boundaries into other areas. So rather than everything just being about your martial art mat, that crossing boundaries allows Aiki principles to be applied to psychotherapy and law enforcement and politics and stuff like that. So you could say, like when someone says Obama does political Aikido, they're talking about a specific way of, I don't destroy the opposition, I include the opposition, I blend, that sort of thing. That's the ethics applied metaphorically, so poetics. So the implication of the people I talked to was that all Aikido has this. Different people emphasize different parts of it, but it's all related to peacemaking. And then I went through and listed several of the dynamics in our particular community. That's Aikido of Berkeley, Free Aiki Dojo, and Golden Bears Aikido at UC Berkeley, which I teach, and suggested various parts of that are things that we emphasize that are not necessarily emphasized in other parts of the Aikido world, but I would like to suggest should be, that are also directly related to peacemaking, especially in my work as a mediator and teaching conflict resolution, that kind of thing. First one that came to mind, actually came from other people, was leadership style. Kayla Sensei, who knew me, and the rest of us know, has a very relational spirit. She's open and welcoming. She welcomes stylistic diversity in a way that's very unusual in the martial arts. She's warm. She really emphasizes the founders talking about joy and training, and she's extremely vigorous. She's a lively person and very engaging. So her choice of leadership style, I have my own version of that, but the choice of leadership style is something that leads to an open, welcoming, diverse, joyful, vigorous community. Let me skip down to community since I just introduced it. This leadership style leads to the community being a community of understanding, so that everybody understands that these are valued and that this is valued. And we also have potlucks, and we eat together, and we celebrate passages together, we help each other move, weddings, funerals, that kind of thing. We get together on purpose so that there's a feeling of mutual support here, which is where peace happens and community flourishes. And then we offer each other helpful challenges. So we're not just challenging, not just if I can hit you, I will, but helpful challenges. The way that I challenge you, I'm trying to figure out how, if I grab you, you'll learn the technique better. And I'm not just unconsciously grabbing you and trying to prevent you from doing stuff. And that applies also, obviously, to the metaphorical level. I might ask you, I might challenge you about your behavior in a way that's helpful. And then the learning model is a three-part learning model that I super emphasize, and Kayla Sensei doesn't emphasize so directly. But we go through a cycle of training that allows for everything to stop at the beginning. At the basic level, there's full stops. I'm focusing on myself. I'm really checking my balance and my structure. There's an analysis that goes into it. And then my partners are trying their best to be solid but helpful in what they do. And this I'm going to compare to a peace process that is familiar from the peace and conflict studies world, in which these same three steps are what a group goes through when they're moving from being in conflict or at warfare with another group into being a community again. So first of all, people have to stop killing each other. That's one of the big, difficult beginnings. And I have to stop just doing randomly whatever I feel like doing and actually stop and notice what I'm doing and make specific choices. So Kihon, or basic, is full stop, focus on yourself, balance and structure analysis, and the solid but helpful ukes. And then we move on to Kino Nagare, which means flowing. And I wrote flowing motion here because you keep your partner moving. There's no stops in Kino Nagare. I'm focused on the other. I want to know if I'm connected to them and if there's continuity in my message, if I'm really giving them constant instructions. And uke, my partner, is fluid but honest. So they're ready to keep moving, but if I stop connecting to them, they pause or slow down until I get them again. So that's step 1 is solid and structural. Step 2 is fluid and emotion. Step 3 I call kimusubi because it weaves everything together. Kimusubi means tying. And it weaves into now all of these principles so that you can have a challenging uke and still be doing something that's martially effective. Because I would really like for my students not to walk out on the street and be unable to defend themselves because they're so interested in the ideas that their bodies haven't done it enough to be able to actually keep from getting clobbered. That's a really interest to me. Because if I allow myself to get clobbered, I can't very well help in making peace because I'm on the ground. So that's the martial verse. So the stopping version, the moving version, and then the martial, everything comes together. And what I'm interested in that, like we were doing earlier with the timing of your uminage, is I'm interested in a whole systems approach. That when you're in the now and everything's woven together, the timing of it and a consideration of all the parts of it are necessary to not end up getting hit by the second guy when you're dealing with the first guy. So this 3-part model for peacemaking is everything stops and we actually start paying attention to what's going on. And then things start to move again, but in a very careful way that makes sure there's continuity of message and everybody's together, you're staying. And then you actually get up to speed again where you can start into what's really going on when there's danger or pressure or whatever, because you know that these 2 things are possible with your group. So I already covered community. We created that on purpose with these elements in it. And then one thing that you'd think that Aikidoists would be really good about doing and doing easily is on every brochure for my work, I have the phrase conflict done well. It's sort of my thing. But it's directly out of Aikido. The difference between this martial art and some other martial arts is what you're interested in the karate that I started and things like that is you're interested in being as effective as possible in damaging the other person so there's not a chance of them continuing to assault. And whereas that might seem like conflict done well to some, in my experience, they have brothers, they have friends. If you do some serious damage, you end up in jail. That's not really done well. And so what I'm interested in is changing the idea of conflict itself to that sort of all win, or if not win, nobody goes home in a bag sort of feel. That is something you have to insist on. It's sort of a martial feeling of insistence, but about nonviolence. So I call my work Martial Nonviolence because this conflict done well aspect is that full systems. I'm going to figure it out. I'm going to get good enough at it that I can participate in that process so that everybody gets all of what they need and a chance at what they want before we even start talking about other stuff. And then to make that happen, the founder was really clear about there being a necessary improvisational quality so that when you're actually in the moment, kimusubi, and everything's woven together and someone's attacking you, there's an emergence of technique. There's a variation of style. You toss out whether your feet are in the right place or not, and you just move because your feet have been in the right place over and over and over, and your body just knows how that works. So takemusu is that improvisational, variation-friendly emergence of technique in response to whatever the attack is. And the people I admire the most in the process arts, by which I mean the field of group process, facilitation, and design, that sort of thing, the peacemakers in the world are amazingly good at takemusu. They've done their basics, they have their structure, they're breathing, they're taking care of their own body, they're not afraid because they know what they aren't overwhelmed by their fear because they know that they have capacity, and they notice in what emerges so that the people they're with have an experience of community and of peace, and that's the thing that gets fed and keeps going, rather than telling people you will be peaceful sort of thing. That's an experience of peace, which Aikido can be. So this is what I'm interested in, the reason I participate in Aiki extensions, the reason I'm an Aikidoist, and the reason it's important to do an International Aiki Peace Week. Questions? Observations? I mean, we've been moving for 2 hours, basically, and this is the last time that I'll go through this, and we're going to post this on the internet because people have asked that I do so. But I just wanted to make it clear and write it down and answer some questions in this way. Is there anything anybody immediately when you look at this list or you hear what we're talking about that you say, oh yeah, I see how that fits, or that you had an experience that relates to any of these principles?
I guess when I train going through Kihon, Kinanagaroi, and Kintsugi is knowing when I have to, or starting to be aware of when I need to switch from one to the other, and seeing the clear distinction and what that means. And I like how you wrote how it relates to different things, to the self, the other, and the whole system, because I hadn't really thought of that, but when I stop and think about that, then that does help to make it more clear.
Thank you. Anybody else? Is there anything in here you really recognize as catching your attention as something that you're either good at or working on, or any of that?
When solving inner conflict, onset by a loss or a personal challenge, or trying to grow as a person. Now, certainly we have discussed a lot of information, a lot of ideas and themes that go along. And ultimately, when we're in Kimusugi, we're in the mode where we are Hakimusugi, we are out and in action, and we cannot think as much. We have to have an empty-mindedness. Are we necessarily striving for empty-mindedness all the time through the accumulation of information and then letting that influence our behavior, or are we trying to grow by developing just ourselves in a way that is a structure, like a mathematical structure, something that's built on a foundation? Is there a foundation that we operate on, or is there something that we're trying to get at ground level?
Rather than responding to the question of is there one or is there the other, I'm going to give you a Martial answer, and that is when you're doing one, the other draws your attention so that it establishes a tension. So when I am really working on my foundation, the freedom from that foundation is what draws my attention as where I'm working towards. And when I'm feeling free of that foundation, it's sort of improvisational. The structure of what I've done over and over and over and over makes that possible. So it's not are we doing one or the other, it's when I'm predominantly doing one, the other is the one that pulls me back into the middle of the work. Does that make sense? That's the best, I don't know that I have an answer to your question, but that's my best response, is that we work with tensions. It's the person who grabs me that gives me the information about where to move. It's that tension between apparent opposites that makes it clear that they aren't really opposite. They're related boundaries of the same conversation. You can swing really far in this way, or you can swing really far that way, but either way it's the same conversation. One relates to the other. That's what keeps us in a relationship. That's why this is necessary, I think. Anything else while we're here?
I just gotta say this is my first time taking Aiki Peace. And I have done a lot of other martial arts, and the vibe of this martial arts, kind of what you were saying earlier, for lack of a better word, was attack, bring back the force, bang, 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 you know, and that sort of idea spread throughout the whole dojo. So it was always competition, it was always resist. And coming in here, I feel the respect everybody has for each other, and that kind of on your board there, it's a community and all that. I feel that just from one day here. So I can see how it brings peace, because everybody's respecting each other. Everybody, it's a completely different approach to the training. So I'm really digging it. I think
Sweet.
It's cool.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Excellent. Thanks for saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, my most obvious, personally, in my personal story, the most obvious transition from feeling really ready to deal some damage and being moved in a more peaceful direction had to do with the other person's clear decision that they weren't going to be doing that. I could feel free to be really pissed off, to be really committed to a more violent, even emotionally violent course of action. And they could respect that, but they weren't freaked out by it, and they weren't interested in participating. I could feel free to feel that way, but that's not. And they would be available if I chose to choose another mode, but I wasn't going to push them around in the meantime. That's what they were choosing. That's who they were. When they got up in the morning and looked in the mirror, that's who they wanted to see, and I could find something else to do until I was ready to join them with that. That's kind of what I mean by martial nonviolence. Is that it wasn't a floppy, uncertain thing. They had decided, and they weren't going to push it on me. Of course, they weren't going to let me hit them, or scream at them. They were going to say, "Okay, I get that you're really upset. Maybe another time we'll be good to talk." Because I got other stuff. I get that you're really upset. I'm happy to listen to you, but I'm not going to, I'm not going to be yelled at. So maybe another time will be good.
And
It's like.
it seems like it comes down to respect, mutual respect.
And I felt respected.
Yeah.
But I also felt like I wasn't being treated like a child. They didn't yell at me. They didn't join in. That's not what they were going to do. That's not what they were about. But they were patient with me. I felt respected. And that's what I wish, the Republicans would do with the Democrats and vice versa. And, that's sort of, actually, there are men and women out there risking their lives right now in order to cause enough damage to bring a war to a conclusion. What if all of those men and women said, I'm still going to risk my life. I know that it could cost me the ultimate price, but what's going to happen here is fewer and fewer and fewer people are going to get killed. You and your children are going to get more and more chance to get what you need, and that's it. And I'm willing to put my life on the line for that. Just like I was willing to put my life on the line to, go and battle. This is a battle, it's the same thing, and everybody's going to get what they need at the end of it. And that's the end. I've decided. And some have all day, and some have all day, and here we are. So say we all, so to speak, to be mythological. Anyway, thanks. And more later. If you have any questions, please ask. I'll do my best to respond. And I'm going to put this up on the web. The video will go up, the picture of this will go up, and I'll put it up and send out a link.
Thanks.
Thanks, Joe.